As for Rasmussen, our founder said this morning, there is a way out for Putin. It's a way out of Ukraine. After hearing Leonid Volkov, I might add, there's a way out for Putin. It's the way out of power as well. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. We have a keynote with Kent Walker, the Chief Legal Officer of Google and Anaphorbet. He will be speaking, of course, on the same theme of our today of defending Ukraine with a view from tech, which has also been really sort of vital in Ukraine's struggle against Putin and Russia. Kent Walker, the stage is yours. Pleasure.
Thank you, and thanks to the Alliance for Democracies for bringing us all together today. As we heard from President Zelensky a few moments ago, on February 24th, the world watched in horror as Russia invaded Ukraine. While the tension had been building for weeks, that didn't make the invasion itself any less shocking. When tanks once again were rumbling through the streets of European cities, the world was holding its breath, wondering whether this marked a return to the law of the jungle, a return to mock politique over cooperation in solving shared concerns. And we were reminded once again that democratic process is not inevitable, that democracy and the rules-based international order are by no means guaranteed. Even before the invasion, there have been worrying signs that democracy was under assault. Freedom House found that the defining features of democracy, free expression, open debate, free association, the rule of law, had retreated in nearly 50 countries around the world. I'd like to speak today about the debt that technology owes to democracy and how technology can work with democracy to repay that debt. But first, let's talk about why that partnership is so critically important. Democracy has always been fertile soil for innovation and basic research. Inventors flourish when they can exchange ideas, take risks, test hypotheses, and explore new avenues for inquiry and collective innovation. And democratic values of openness and pluralism allow cooperation and scientific inquiry itself to flourish. It would be hard to argue that the advances that were made possible by democratic innovation, advances that have doubled life expectancies and lifted billions of people out of extreme poverty around the world, would have been possible under any other form of government. But technology can also benefit democracy itself by proving that democracies can deliver for citizens, expanding choice, raising living standards. Future generations of technology will help us combat climate change, pioneer personalized medicine, improve agricultural productivity, and more. But even beyond improving living standards, delivering on the substantive promise of democracy, technology and innovation can also be a force for democratic procedural legitimacy, supporting democratic institutions, increasing transparency, increasing accountability and governance, protecting and promoting human rights. When developed and used responsibly, technology can foster the essential exchange of ideas and broaden civic engagement in the democratic process. After all, democracies need at least three elements to flourish: a robust public square where people can express ideas openly, an active and a vibrant press, and free and fair elections that create accountability, letting citizens check and balance power. Well, there's no question that the misuse and abuse of technology has created challenges in each of these areas, from within and from without. Conversations of the last few months with defense leaders in Munich, business leaders in Davos, security experts in Eastern Europe have made it clear that we need responsible use of technology to support each of these three essential elements. So first, how can technology defend the public square, safeguarding speech and debate? I believe that tech can promote and protect the marketplace of ideas by playing both offense and defense, facilitating free and open discourse while combating misinformation and disinformation. The early days of Silicon Valley fostered a faith that more communication would be better for the world. And in many ways it has been, connecting people in remarkable new ways. That said, we've also come to recognize that abuses of our platforms, harmful efforts to spread malicious information, or patently false information have to be dealt with. We've responded by removing content that violates our policies, raising up authoritative voices, especially at critical times, rewarding trusted creators, and reducing borderline content. That requires tough calls, sometimes millions of them a day. And we're working on ways to provide more transparency into this critical process. The latest and the most dramatic chapter in the battle against disinformation came with the invasion of Ukraine, where we're all witnessing not just a military or an economic war, but also a cyber war and an information war. It's an extraordinary situation that called for a commensurate response. YouTube took the extraordinary step of globally blocking disinformation channels like RT and Sputnik, removing more than 8,000 channels and more than 70,000 videos for violating our policies. That was content that minimized the war's toll or spread harmful lies about what was really happening on the ground. Meanwhile, Google Search, Google News, and YouTube are some of the last independent sources of news available in Russia about the war. On the cybersecurity front, when we saw a spike of distributed denial of service attacks on Ukrainian websites, we protected access to information and kept sites online by bringing publishers and government websites under Google's security umbrella called Project Shield. As a result of these efforts, we were proud to be the first company to receive the Ukrainian government Special Peace Prize, showing how important tech's role can be when the stakes are highest. And that brings me to the second cornerstone of functioning democracy, a free and a vibrant press, and how technology can help it adapt to a digital world. Google was founded with a mission of organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. Over the years, our ad networks have provided billions of dollars to news publishers, and we've sponsored programs like the Google News Initiative, partnering with publishers to create innovative tools and approaches to reporting. And of course, technology has also had a significant impact on newspaper business models, unbundling different categories, making news more competitive and more freely available. But technology can also be the key to the evolution of the news business for this digital era. As Herbert Simon said, coming on 50 years ago, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. And that means there's a growing role for editors and publishers, for curators and analysts who can help us all allocate our limited attention wisely. It means there's a growing need for us to support content creators and a thriving global press. So turning to the third element of democracy, technology has a vital role to play when it comes to the integrity of our elections. At Google, we've long created tools and resources to make it easier for people to vote. Our services connect voters with up-to-date, authoritative information about polling locations, remote voting, election times, and more. During election cycles, campaigns also face increased security threats. That's why we equip them and work with election workers on best-in-class security tools. We've worked together with partners in Europe to give political campaigns access to free tightened security keys. That's the strongest form of two-factor authentication. It's all part of our advanced protection program, which protects high-risk individuals, election officials, campaigns, journalists, human rights activists, and gives them access to high visibility, people who have access to high visibility and sensitive information. So just this past May, our Jigsaw teams announced a new initiative called Protect Your Democracy, which brings together a suite of tools like these to help countries that are on the front line for the fight for democracy. We've launched the initial phase of this project in Central and Eastern Europe, and we're going to be rolling it out to support democracies across the globe. Finally, our threat analysis group is working to thwart cyber attacks, monitoring, exposing espionage, hacks, phishing campaigns, and taking steps to disrupt those. In recent months, we've stopped coordinated attacks by government actors from China, Iran, North Korea, and yes, Russia. And we've stopped attacks by various unattributed groups to sow information in democracies around the world. So our role is clear. We help protect people and prevent future attacks by identifying bad actors and sharing relevant information. These are examples of the way tech can help today across the public square, the free press, and elections themselves. But the more fundamental point is that defending democracy and the rules-based international order is a task that requires tech and civil society and governments to come together. An Edelman survey found that people often think of governments and NGOs as well-intentioned, but not necessarily the most effective. And they think of companies as perhaps effective, but not necessarily always the best intentioned. But when the two worked together, they built up, they moved to the upper right-hand quadrant, both well-intentioned and effective. That's one of the reasons why we've supported the Copenhagen Pledge on Tech for Democracy and similar multilateral commitments by governments, industry, and civil society coming together to make technology work for democracy and promote human rights. Democracy is at a watershed moment. There's a risk that democracies turn inward, focusing strictly on domestic challenges rather than defending the liberal, democratic international order. And tech, too, is at a crossroads with a risk that concerns about abuses of technology obscure its many benefits. In 1996, John Perry Barlow, who was a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, wrote a declaration of the independence of cyberspace, arguing that the internet was beyond any government's laws. Well, perhaps it's now time for a declaration of interdependence of cyberspace. Because after all, our growing technological connections have become so important to our daily lives that technologists need to work ever more closely with governments on new and agile rules to promote progress, national security, and the defense of the public square. International frameworks from the UN to the WTO to the OECD can be useful starting places as we work to promote international alignment, and only governments can drive this crucial work. We need governments committed to open, democratic processes to step up and work together to affirm international norms of access to information and the free and open exchange of ideas. At Google, we are eager to roll up our sleeves to help that process. Of course, we leave the politics to the politicians, but that doesn't mean we leave it to others to defend the public square, nor does it mean we take lightly the experience and ideas of government leaders in the cause of protecting democracy. We hear the summons to defend democracy's essential components, the open exchange of views, the independent press, free and fair elections. In moments of uncertainty and crisis, responsible tech companies feel a duty to do what our engineers do best: unlock solutions to the most pressing problems. We undertake that task with full appreciation that those solutions must be, the product of collaboration, building on the kind of collective innovation that has always made democracies stronger than their adversaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I want to follow up on a point you made in your speech. You said that Google has not stopped free services in Russia, like search and Gmail and YouTube. You called them the last independent sources of news. There are others who have called, however, for a complete digital cutoff. Is there a point at which you'd do that?
We feel that our role is to provide high-quality information to people around the world, including people in Russia, so that they can learn about the human rights abuses, the true nature of what's going on with the invasion and the war. And that's a mission that we take seriously in Russia and around the world. So our contribution is honestly to get the facts out, get the truth out, and we will stand by that and continue to do that as long as we are able to.
Okay, so there is no line as far as you're concerned.
Our goal, we obviously have pushed back on demands to remove content from YouTube, and we do draw a line there because, again, we are trying to make sure that we are providing sources of high-quality information. We want Google Search to be an antidote to fake news.
Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Defense has been very impressive in this war. I'm wondering if there are lessons to be learned from that for both the government sector, but also the tech sector as well.
The Ukrainian government has been very savvy in its communications around the world, its use of digital channels to form ways to communicate with people, to enlist support for the Ukrainian people. And they have also had to weather a variety of cyber attacks at the same time. And the technology community has responded and tried to help defend Ukrainian people and Ukrainian institutions.
We have a couple of questions from the audience. Let me work those in. Russia is waging not only a physical but also a digital war in Ukraine, as mentioned. What more should tech companies be doing to defend Ukraine? You mentioned that you have a program in place, but comment a little on the rest of the industry and whether they're doing perhaps all they could and should.
I think there's broad collaboration between the industry, but also with governments around the world, the Ukrainian government and other governments, to understand the cyber threat landscape in Ukraine and globally, exchanging information, working in a collaborative fashion, because in many cases, cyber warfare works precisely because it's below the radar screen. If you can detect the threat, publish information about it, you put everyone else in the community on notice, and they can defend themselves.
What do you think actually, writ large, are the roles and the responsibilities of tech companies vis-a-vis democracy? How would you frame it?
Yes. Our role is to be a contributor to a constructive public conversation. When we came up early in the history of technology, there was a notion that unfettered communication was always going to be good for everybody. And I think we've realized abuses of terrorism, hate speech, other sorts of abuses, misuses of the platforms. And so we are taking steps to promote high-quality information, reduce material that's problematic in different ways, and we have to do that.
And yet it continues. So much more needs to be done. Do you have a roadmap?
Yes. Well, I think there's a historical perspective on this, and from the printing press to the rise of newspapers in the 1800s, to radio, to television, cable television. Every new communication platform creates its own social challenges, even as it creates opportunities. So we have to work together with government setting regulations, but society setting norms, the products understanding how their services are being used, and improving as we go along. We're in the middle of that process.
In the middle of it?
Yeah.
Can you make progress any more quickly, please?
Yes. We are doing. I can assure you and the audience that this is a big priority for our engineers and for all of us at Google. We are constantly, every day, making changes to our algorithms, hundreds of changes just to the Google search algorithm alone, to promote higher quality content. And I think you've actually seen a significant change for Google, for YouTube, for other services from just a few years ago in the way we're using AI, the way we're expanding our policies, the way we are being what we call glocal, simultaneously global and local, understanding the different threat vectors that are coming.
We heard earlier from Nico Jaspers, who presented the Democracy Perception Index to the audience, and they found that public opinion shows that big tech is viewed as a threat to democracy. How can you counter that? Can you counter that?
Well, we're not primarily a social media company. We don't have the virality on our services. Google Search, generally speaking, I believe is thought to be a positive contributor to the public debate. I was at dinner. I was interested. I was at dinner the other night, and people were saying, "Oh, my friends are telling me about conspiracy theories," and I tell them, "Just Google it." And more often than not, you can actually get accurate answers that can debunk some of the myths out there. We continue that work. It's absolutely an unfinished project. And as Larry Page said, search isn't a finished engineering project and probably never will be. So we continue to invest in this. We have, I think, 15,000 computer science PhDs working at Google, trying to refine and promote better, higher quality information.
So do you have a task for us very quickly as we wrap up? You've talked about the need for cooperation between government and tech. Is there something that we can do here at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit which would help push that forward? Let
me start by just saying the existence of the summit is a wonderful moment to bring together exactly these different groups, technology, civil society, and governments, to start to talk about what are the next steps? How do we have constructive transparency? How do we answer hard questions about who makes which decisions and on what basis? How do we reconcile contending social imperatives, important values, privacy, competition, content moderation, which can be in tension with each other? That's a democratic conversation. No one company, no one industry can get to the right answers. Each country, each region will need to make the decisions for itself.
Mr. Walker, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.